today we have with us Mr. Greg Weiss, who wears various hats. He is an expert in career transitioning, outplacement, and retirement planning. He is also an executive coach and has authored 4 amazing books on these topics. He is also the founder of Career 365 and Soulidify, which helps businesses in Sydney to find their operational soulmates. So, Greg, would you like to elaborate more on what does this operational soulmates mean and how did this idea kick off?
So as far as Soulidify is concerned, I meditate, and one of the reasons why I actually also wanted to call it Soulidify, Soulidify, is because if you get the right person in place, particularly an operational leader, then it really makes a huge difference to the way the soul of the business works. So it solidifies, and it's the play on words. The Career 365 side of things has been probably more established than Soulidify. It actually, whilst Soulidify is a recruitment business looking at talent mapping and talent pipelining, Career 365 is one that looks after career transitioning. And we've been doing that for about 10 plus years and are very, very well established. So personally, I've coached in excess of 1,500 people, all of whom, or most of whom, have actually been moving from one job to another. And it's a very responsible thing to do, is to help people work out what it is they want to do next when the change has been imposed on them by their organization.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And also, Greg, you have seen the journey of building a platform, putting it out in the market, building a team for that platform, and seen a journey of that growth trajectory as well. What do you think has been the biggest challenge in the initial nascent years of having a product to launch in the market and then seeing it modify and change shape based on the market and market acceptance and the need of the market?
I think it's a really, really good question. So I've built and developed a number of businesses over time. Some have been really good, some of them have been terrible. So when it comes to Soulidify and Career 365, if I can talk to you about those, when I first started with Career 365, it actually wasn't called that. It was actually called The First Few Seconds. And it was all about me thinking that people needed to make impressions in the first few seconds that people meet other people, particularly in a job situation. We launched ahead of time. We launched about 10, 11, 12 years ago, let's call it a decade. And I must say, in that first year, I can sum up the number of sales that we had in that target market, and that's zero, absolutely zero. It was awful. It was an absolute emotional drain on myself and the people who were involved, and frankly, me feeling as a provider to my family. It was awful, just absolutely awful. So what I ended up doing was thinking more deeply about the market and flipped it. So the lesson number one is that you may do some research and you may go in and find that research might be one way, but you've got to be able to just make sure that people are prepared to pay for it. What I have learned as a result of that is don't go all in on what you think that the market's going to need. Test it, have minimally viable products as a result. Test it, improve it, change it. And over those years with Career 365, we moved from calling it the first few seconds, then we called it Career Support 365. That was too long a name, and we just changed it after people had started to call it like Career 360, Support 360, Support 365. We decided to call it Career 365. The name you might think is not important. It actually is important to a point, but much more importantly, it's about feeling confident about the idea of going to the marketplace and testing, going in the marketplace again and testing and testing and testing. So fast forward, this year we launched a transitioning to retirement product, and I was really going to go boots in and record very expensive video modules. Instead, what I ended up actually doing was launching with an MVP, a minimally viable product, for that. Delighted that we did that, because the go-to-market price for that was really quite minimal. But the take-up of that has actually proven to me that there's a product out there, certainly at least in Australia, for people my age and older who are considering retiring. And one of the other things I would say is that as business evolved, I decided, I thought, I'm getting older, and yet, and to some extent, it actually may be a disadvantage. But what I ended up actually doing was working out that the older I am, the wiser I might become, or actually the wiser I might be perceived, and using my age as a strength in terms of coaching people, certainly in the transition into retirement piece. So it evolves. Developing a platform is very, very important to start off with something, test it, evolve it, learn, and then at some particular point in time, you can go to market by testing something that's reasonable to bring to the marketplace. And once you've got confidence about that, then invest and finesse that side of things. And I did the same thing with Soulidify, where what we did was we started off with operational other halves, and we've actually expanded things out to talent mapping, talent pipelining, more general recruitment work. But the more general recruitment work came about because I decided within the recruitment side of things not to be a small operator that might be perceived as being boutique, but in fact joining a recruitment network that's worldwide. And only today I've had confirmation that we are that close to making a placement into Bangladesh, which we would never have been able to do had we not been part of that network. But the idea is always be nimble and always consider the way in which the market is moving. And to that point, if I can just share, and that is that I believe that with the volatility and the changes, the humongously fast changes that are taking place nowadays, especially now ramped up with AI and how much more readily things are available to people and the speed at which things are going, I would say to you that the important thing is just to evolve and to listen to the marketplace and just to continue to evolve.
And very correctly said, Greg, because the market is changing humongously fast, especially with the AI in place. Where do you think that great balance or great mix of AI plus human touch serves the product better, serves the customers better, and serve the people associated with the brand better?
I think that's a great question. And so we're living in and I wanted to just make sure maybe your listeners and your audience may be aware of the term VUCA, V-U-C-A, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex. C is complex and A is ambiguous. And that's the environment we're in. So if it's ambiguous or complex or ambiguous, whatever, the point is that AI can really help us navigate through that, but it can also add to the whole VUCA-ness of whatever we're doing. Now, I think AI has its pluses and its minuses. So there are an enormous number of things that we're just starting to see that AI is contributing into the marketplace. We use AI every day in everything that we do, or I should say, we use AI across many processes or many things that we do in order to be able to accelerate the delivery to a client. However, I am very particular about using AI with a human eye. And I would strongly counsel any of your listeners, any of your audience, to really consider AI as being something which is a tool, but not the end result. And my use of AI is something which I've used that the more and more specific that I am with it, the better it is. But I still never accept it for just taking it spat out for what it is. So as an example, one of my team gave me a series of things today, And it's very clear that, no disrespect to one of my team, but it was garbage in, garbage out. And it just doesn't show enough understanding or human understanding about that particular sector that we were targeting this particular piece of communication to. AI itself, from a delivery perspective, incredible. I have inputted vast numbers of things that I never would have imagined, even with AI coming to almost its second birthday second anniversary since its launch. But what I would say is that we're still only scratching the surface, and I'm dumbfounded. I absolutely am aghast with how powerful the stuff is. But again, it's garbage in, garbage out. You'll only get the results that you want from AI if you input into it in the appropriate way. So we've used it for content, but again, human eyes. For in my recruitment business, we've used it for summary preparation, but again, using human eyes. When I was coaching people, we were coaching recently a company that had, through Career 365, we were coaching an organization in Australia that let go about 120 people, and a good 90 of those wanted new resumes. How would we do that? I was very upfront and said, you are going to sit with me, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through and type in a job description and work through things, and through 2 or 3 iterations, it sped up the delivery of something which really just made me amazed, that I would think per person probably would have taken maybe a day to do, but within minutes, literally, that was done. And I'm sure we've all experienced this with each other, but AI, I know, is being used in recruitment across search filters, across LinkedIn. You can see AI in LinkedIn. You can see AI through ATSs, applicant tracking systems, and the like. It's just literally, and the applications are just on and on and on. So what I'd say is, just in summary, AI is a fantastic tool, but I never ever want to use this alone. I want to make sure that I'm not just using it as the be-all, end-all. I've got to see it with my own eyes, and my team, I've got to make sure that they do the same thing.
Perfect. Also sharing our experience, Greg, where we use AI is in matchmaking. So for example, specifically talking about India, we have seen that when companies across the globe look out to hire from India, the first thing they try out is possibly posting a job on platforms like LinkedIn. But specifically talking about India, as soon as you post a job, there are thousands and thousands of applications. There's no limitation to the applications you get. The challenge becomes to find and screen through the best and relevant profiles and the candidates from those applications, which is a humongous task if done manually.
Yes.
So there, what we do is we use our AI in matchmaking to shortlist the most relevant profiles. And there, when we get the first filter of shortlisted profiles, there we add a human touch, where an expert, a recruitment expert who understands the job as well as the position and the capabilities of candidates, takes up a call, screens through the relevancy of the applicants, and then possibly makes the best match and then shares across for our clients. So that is where we have seen our input of AI making a humongous, as you said, very much useful when you are out there to reduce the time it takes. For example, if done manually, it would have taken months and months to screen all those applications.
Yeah, with thousands of applicants, absolutely.
And then having an AI just makes it a job of a day or a two. That's also one of the benefits that I think we share commonly.
Absolutely. Yeah, your scale in India is very different to the scale we have in Australia. We might get still a lot of people, but a lot to us is maybe 100. But if you're talking about thousands or hundreds of thousands, it's an impossible task. And coming from the most populous country now on the planet, and one of the most intelligent ones, it would mean a lot of time spent that AI can now fix up. Absolutely.
Yep. And also, Greg, you have utilized Uplers hiring platform to hire from India.
Yeah.
And given your decades of experience in offshoring, we would love to hear some tips from you today on do's and don'ts while hiring from India. So just to begin with, can you share how and when did your offshoring journey began?
My offshore journey began years ago. An early user of the predecessor to what's called Upwork, but it used to be Odesk. And I had some success, probably around maybe about 45 to 50% success rate, and then it improved as we got more and more experienced. So I've been outsourcing for quite some time. I have team members who are not in India, but other parts of the world, as well as in Australia. And what I can say, and the benefit of outsourcing to Uplers, I'd say, versus another type of platform, is that we get a benefit that there is an account manager, that we actually have humans overseeing things. If I have an issue, I can come back and say, I've got a problem here with my talent that I've got from Uplers, and I know that you can fix that up nicely, whereas in a non-supportive environment, you don't get that. And so I consider that the fees that we pay to Uplers reasonable, and it's like an insurance policy. I mean, I'm used to recruitment because I'm in recruitment, but as a client, tight with my money, I'd like to actually be very careful with my money, particularly when times are more and more difficult and so on and so forth. But what I do know is I can pick the phone up, or I can email you, or I can email Nani or other people within Uplers, and know that I'm going to have an attention to my concern handled appropriately. So if you're intending to offshore, I would strongly suggest that you consider very tightly and very clearly about what it is that you want to offshore to. Now, a guy like me, I'm an entrepreneurial guy, so I might come to Uplers and say, I want this, but the project might creep out to that, okay, individually. Over time, when I get more comfortable with a talent that I might get from Uplers. But the first thing that you want to do is get the core needs that you're looking for well understood and then well articulated by Uplers. When Uplers presents talent, then the important thing is, do you fit with that talent? Does that talent fit with you? Do they really have the skills? Because Uplers will try their hardest to be able to really understand what the need is, but it's really up to you, the company, to really be much more discerning about, can that individual fit with you, and can they do the job? The other thing, to be frank, and I want to say this in the right way, and that is that I have an accent and you have an accent. There's not a right one or a wrong one. I have an Aussie one and you have an Indian English one, okay? There are different people from different parts of India that have different dialects and therefore different accents. And I do find that sometimes there is a little bit of a challenge, but as long as we have an authentic, open relationship between me and the talent that you provide me, it's not hard, and the like. The last thing I would say, and that is that, and this is something that's a little difficult, but won't be able to be fixed easily, and that is, I'm in Sydney, Australia, and that at the moment is 5.5 hours difference at this particular time, and we're talking about November of 2024, okay? And we're in summertime now because we're moving into summer. You can see the nice colour here and the like, but it's not fixable. So you have to actually factor in the idea, can people work on your team at the time that they're available, that you're available, or can you set up systems that are asynchronous? In other words, can they work on their own and then you catch up? And so what I do with my team is I request they put together end of day reports. I can go through those end of day reports before they start and highlight things. So that what we can do is we can have a huddle, a short meeting, or a longer one if it's needed, to go through those issues that carry over. So that's what I'd be suggesting in terms of outsourcing, what I've learned from outsourcing and how to certainly manage talent. But I would say it's a really great way for countries that have high costs in their countries to go to countries where there are lower costs and outsource to talent. And the last thing I'd say is that I've been to India twice and probably spent a good, look, I'm no expert, but I've traveled to many different parts of India. I have an immense respect for your country, and for the rising up of India as a nation. I believe it should be, frankly, I'll go political here, a country that's so well defined and has such a long history should be part of the Security Council of the United Nations. What a mess that thing is. And India needs to be really considered to be a significant power intellectually, militarily, economically, and the talent that comes out of India and the education level that comes out of India and the innovations that come out of India means that you've got to be serious and think, my team member needs to come out of India. And that's why I think Uplers is really well placed to help grow and scale an organization.
Amazing. I think you bring us to a very great point here, Greg. When a company is building teams, especially teams outside the current landscape, there are certain cultural differences, as you rightly highlighted. One which we have seen is, especially in India, given the culture that we have, we are very subtle in our achievements. We don't shout out there that, okay, hey, I have done this in my achievement. This is what I did in my previous company. So when the candidates are out there in interviews, generally the language we use, like this, is we. It's not that I was able to contribute this, I was able to achieve this. And there is a subtle difference which is interpreted differently in different regions, specifically in Western countries, seen as something, okay, have you not done yourself individually anything? Is it always, together? Many such cultural differences interestingly come out in our conversations. What are one or two most, I would say, highlighted experiences you have experienced working with the talents from India, and how did you resolve it?
Okay, so in my Career 365 business, just on the basis of it's not just Indians who do this, but we actually find that, and I'm using that correctly, we find that a lot of people who are not used to interview often talk about, we did this, we did that, we did the other. I tell people that don't do that because you're going to we all over yourself, and they laugh and the like. But the truth is that you actually have to mention about, and to your listeners, it's an important thing to be able to balance the humility, being humble about things, but also know that I'm not hiring I'm hiring you. So I say to people who we coach in Australia, don't we all over yourself, say, my role in the team was this. I have contributed that to the company doing this particular type of work or that particular type of work. In my role as a team, I did this. So that what I can do is I can get a sense about the individual's contribution rather than the we. So it's not just Indians, it's also Aussies and many other people. Culturally, I think the important thing is, look, first of all, if we can talk sport is always a good leveler. I remember going to India the first time, and Ricky Ponting was really big time. And anytime we would say that we're from Australia, people would say, Ricky Ponting, and it was fantastic. Okay. And the last time I was in India, it was almost the same thing. Okay. So I do think that if you can find some commonality in terms of some sort of sport thing, Australia was always a better cricket team. But
yes, like we do in meditation. I'm a great meditator myself, and hence I could so much relate to this concept of finding an operational soulmate. I think such commonalities beyond culture, I think on personal level also always are a great bridge.
Yeah,
In
they are.
culture.
And so I think the important thing is also is explaining to somebody who may not be familiar with your own culture. So we get a talent from Uplers. What does that actually mean? I'm going to want to spend some time successfully onboarding that talent. I want to make sure that that person understands more about me and the team, more about why we do things. So onboarding is very important. And then some of the nuances over time. So having the permission to ask things. Sometimes certain cultures are very deferential. Oh, you're the boss, I'm the subordinate. No, as an Aussie, most of the time, I like to consider that I've got insight, but I also want to be led by an expert that I get from Uplers, for example. So I want to make sure that I'm letting people understand what I would expect, because us Aussies are much more direct than say from the Philippines. If you're placing people from the Philippines, those people from the Philippines are far more diplomatic than Aussies, for example. So the important thing is to, no matter where your listeners are coming from, is to onboard people successfully, get them to understand what the role's about, help them as much as they can, because they won't necessarily slip in immediately. And then also from the cultural side of things, whether it's meditation, whether it's the sport or whatever it is, but whatever it is, find something that helps them understand a leveler that we can talk about, but also what are your values and what are your organization's values, and hearing it from the other side. One other question I like to ask people, and that is, how do you like to best operate? And I want to hear what that person, if they're comfortable to express it. So and I'll probably do that at an interview, but I want to understand what really makes, what works well for them, so that we don't have any mistakes, or at least what we've got is we create the greatest chance of us really working well with each other. The last but not least thing that I probably will add to that, and that is that for somebody to be successful, you need to ease them in and help them understand your systems, and give them a chance to learn your systems, and also emphasize, and this is something that I have within my team, and that is that we are a learning culture, not a mistakes culture, meaning that you will make mistakes, but I want you to learn from your mistakes as you go. And you've got permission to make mistakes, but not the same mistake repeatedly.
Absolutely. And mistakes definitely are a part of any innovative culture that the company, especially in the startup stage, try to encourage. But yes, learning from them and not making the same mistakes is actually the key for faster success. One more thing, Greg, you mentioned that it becomes key when you're building a core team. What I'm trying to highlight here is when the global companies look out to build their teams in India, the names may not be well known in Indian continent. The brand may not be well known. So what becomes important, even before beginning the interview sessions, having expo call, or I would say a call or an interaction where the companies are highlighting what they are, who they are, where they plan to go, why they're planning to build their teams, what's their long-term goal. Having that interaction initially really helps the candidates to understand and relate to where they fit in that journey, and then move forward with the interviews accordingly. That streamlines the whole process, and not only in the onboarding, they feel committed when they start the journey from the interview stage itself. So this is one great learning we as well share. Having that match or having that discussions, open discussions, transparent discussions with each other definitely helps bridging that gap and just finding the operational soulmate for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The important thing is when you're hiring a talent from Uplers, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're giving that person, creating the conditions that allow the success to happen, and then let them understand what the purpose of the role is. Let them understand the purpose of the organization. So, and look, my brands aren't huge. They're well known in Australia, but they're not huge. So people people have to actually, any new talent has to be brought in and acclimatized to understand what the plans are, what the purpose of the business is about, who the target market is, and what that individual's role is all about to support the overall business growing itself.
Okay, again, coming back to your offshoring journey, Craig, what alternatives did you use when you first began to explore hiring from India? And what are the pros and cons of each of those alternatives, along with possibly Uplers?
Well, it's a good question where I looked at. So my go-tos in the past were Upwork, as I've shared earlier in today's discussion. And I found that there are some real pluses with Upwork. I'm not saying that it's not the right platform, but there is something that gives me far greater assurance in dealing with and via Uplers than just going to a platform that advertises talent that's reviewed 5 stars, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt that it was important to connect with an organization that had previously worked with other people that I respect in the Australian market. And I hadn't heard of Uplers before, but there were a couple of people who had mentioned Uplers. One in particular, I remember going out for lunch with this particular person, and they had recommended Uplers. So immediately there was a halo effect. Your reputation had gone up. My belief in, okay, well, if you've got success, I guess I could. And so what I thought was Upwork or Uplers. No, it's funny, I just realized that they both have up in them. But I felt like dealing with Uplers, where you could do the spade work, where you could actually do the digging and come to me with assurances that you've evaluated people, was one advantage. And the other advantage was that, as I said earlier, any issues that I have, I could come back to you. There's a person I can talk with as opposed to just a platform that I can interact with.
Great. And from your experience, what is the key stage in the whole hiring process that most of the organizations, especially startups, often overlook or underestimate?
Okay, I think the key stage is, so many years ago, and this comes to the point that I mentioned earlier, but many years ago, I remember watching somebody laying carpet in our home, and he had said, whether looking at a carpet roller, he said, measure twice, cut once. In other words, just really think through what it is that you want rather than go into the marketplace and hire somebody and realize that you've made a mistake. So really think through within your organization, what are the gaps that you're looking to replace, and the type of individual that you're looking for. So have a very clear job description. AI can help you with that. We can help you with that. You can help your clients with that. And then also have the selection criteria worked out well. So measure twice, cut once is an important thing. And then once you've got the people presented to you, have a very clear understanding of what it is that's going to give you assurance that those people are going to, one, have the skills, and two, likely to be able to fit. And it could be anything from, hey, I gel with this individual, to I can hear their accent and they can do this quite well. Or if they're front facing, they've got a very strong accent, it's not going to work. And I don't want to sound like it's discriminatory, but you've got to be able to deal with your customer base. So it's that. And so have a clear understanding, measure twice, cut once about the job description and the selection criteria. Have a very good understanding about the interview and how to go through the interview. And then give Uplers a very, very good understanding about why you like this individual over that, or whether they need to go back into the marketplace because of a change of your brief, or they just may not have got it right. Recruitment, and I'm in it, is not a science entirely. There's some art in it, and so there's a fine balance of science and art. And how do you actually get that? It's up to you to be able to actually give Uplers and any other recruiter you're dealing with the right information. So that's how that's what I would look for.
Absolutely. And it always helps to learn from the feedback and take care of those feedbacks when sharing the next batch of candidates so
Hmm.
that there is lesser time and back and forth in the whole selection process, very rightly said. And when it comes to that, when companies are aiming to build high performing teams in a very fast paced environment, what screening techniques do you recommend to identify the right talents?
Probably the best screening techniques initially would be around using the best practice is behavioral interviewing. I want to know the experience that I'm bringing in, and behavioral interviewing, as I teach it to other people, is situation, action, outcome. Give me a situation, tell me what you did in that situation, and what was the outcome in that particular situation. Okay. So if I'm asking somebody, so give me an example about complex marketing sequences that you put together in campaigns that target B2B, then I want to hear what they've done and the extent to which they've done. I'm asking a specific question. So interview techniques are one thing. Discretionary wise, I would probably get people, there are other tests which I don't think you have to necessarily go to, but you can go to values tests. So there's a values inventory called, I think it's called VA. So that's actually a good one to work out whether there are appropriate values. There are personality tests like MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. They're very well respected. Or DISC profiling. They're very good. I would honestly say that 90% of the time we would use behavioral interviewing exclusively and not use those other tests. I'll know whether somebody's got the experience that I require for a job through behavioral interviewing. So if you don't know what behavioral interviewing is, you can look it up. It's been around. It's best practice rather than just having somebody ramble nonsensically. And what do you test them on? You test them on the selection criteria. There may be things that you can see very readily from their resume, and then hone in on some of those dot points specifically around, okay, you said you did this. Give me an example about that. Tell me more about this. What was the problem you were solving, and so on and so forth. And that's what I use.
Yes, and I think that's a wonderful tip, especially today when AI is not only available in recruitment for matchmaking, it's also available to prepare the resumes, decorate the resumes, and put information out there. These tips definitely help go beneath the layers and try to understand the personality and the relevancy of the position and the candidate. Okay. Okay. So how has your experience been, Greg, hiring straight from, like you mentioned, Upwork, Fiverr, LinkedIn versus Uplers? One point that you mentioned is having that confidence of vetted profiles, that screen profiles before speaking to them helps you reduce your time, efforts, and gives you confidence that, okay, you're going to work with someone who has been tested waters with. What additionally has worked in the whole process, including the AI assessment reports that you get along with the profiles, the interviews that you're able to take? What are other aspects, softer aspects you feel makes this process more refined and easy to work with?
The fact that I can talk to a human being, I know that when we recruit, we have our clients talk to a human being. You don't get that with other platforms, whether it's Fiverr, and they've got some pluses for themselves for short projects, I think. I've had lots of success with Upwork, but again, the question is, I mean, I've often been skeptical about things on platforms, and this is not saying anything about Upwork, because I have said, and platforms like that. And that is that if you go along to a hotel, for example, and you are asked to put up a 5-star report, then you give a 5-star report. Typically, the complaints at the 1-star or the 5-star are really the ones that might post on a hotel. And it's the same thing with a project that you might get from a platform. What I find is, again, different with Uplers is I can talk to a human being. I can write to you and I can say to Uplers, I can say, this is what I'm looking for. We can set up a time where I'm going to get one-on-one or one on a couple, people within Uplers to understand what we're looking for, and then know that you're out there looking for somebody that we're particularly looking for. Sometimes it's worked with us. I know that I briefed you on some things and I thought, you know what, you're close, but now my timing's different, or we've got it wrong a couple of times. What I have done is wrong once. I remember once I had somebody that lovely person, really lovely person, just wasn't thinking at the level that I was expecting, and within 2 weeks you had that person replaced with somebody who's been with me for quite some time.
And last one from you, Greg. What will be your message for the companies which are exploring hiring from India for the first time?
Okay, I would say that you've got to have the confidence to know that you've got a country of in excess of 1 billion people, many of whom are professionals. It's an extraordinary country where there's been a heavy investment in education. The middle class is enormous. There's a rising talent of people. So you can be assured that there's a very high level of education from many people. And in the same way you and I, Reshman, talked about you getting many applications, and we might get hundreds and think 100 and think that's a lot. The scale is very different, meaning that really in terms of India, if you want to tap into India, the best way is really doing it through a firm like Uplers that actually can then spread out to and be very discerning about which areas are the more educated, for example, where those people might more likely come from, if there are dialect issues, and so on and so forth. So I would say that it's been altogether a really positive experience, and I would say that if you can make sure that you really think about what it is that you're wanting, then have the confidence that India is a place that has talent that will get only better and better because of the nature of India, the value that the country places in education, its innovation. And as I said, I'm looking forward to seeing India being promoted much more on the world stage. Please get a seat at the United Nations Security Council. That place needs a major shake-up, and probably the sensibility of India would make a huge difference there. And the other thing actually about India is that it's so incredibly well positioned that it's and with the population change, with a huge population, but with the right smack bang in the center of Asia, it's an old country with enormous culture and richness that I would say, hey, I'd rather employ people from India than many other places. And we in Australia, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but in Australia, we have a very large expat Indian population here. I would say a lot of people have migrated to Australia and made a very, very big success out of it in the professions. We now have in Australia, I think it's the third largest ethnicity is Indian. So we're very comfortable in Australia dealing with people of Indian backgrounds. And I just wish all strength to India.
That's just music to ears, Amin. Right. Thank you, Greg, for sharing your experience and tips on hiring from India. Now it's time for a short rapid fire, fun-wise. So you will get 5 seconds to answer each question and say whatever comes to your mind first. Okay, ready?
I hope so.
Right. Okay. What's your biggest nightmare when it comes to hiring?
Making a mistake.
Okay. Share the funniest interview experience you had while hiring from India.
Funniest, I would probably say just when we can talk a little bit about sport or soccer or cricket, football or cricket, something like that, then we can actually have a little bit of banter with each other, and we can talk about we can joke about each other's teams.
Right. And share any instance when you made a blunder while hiring and which you corrected later or rectified later.
Blunder would be just probably, and rapid fire would be somebody who probably was wrong, and then just at the last minute, we just had last minute thoughts and came back to you and came back to Uplers and had that fixed.
Perfect. Okay. And share any funny instance which you experienced due to cultural differences between both the countries.
Oh, I can share that sometimes in an Indian accent, speaking English very, very fast might be that I just don't even know if the person's actually speaking English. So I actually just ask, please just slow down. It's either my ears that are going because of my age or it's your accent, but either way, let's just sort of help each other out. And we've actually had some good laughs around that side of things.
Perfect. Top 3 tips for other companies hiring from India for the first time.
I would say top 3 tips would be, again, just get the job right, get the job brief right, work out, brief the consultant from Uplers real well, and make sure that what you're doing is you're really understanding that across technology, you might not be able to really hear all that well, but make sure that you're asking the right questions and that you're not getting distracted by anything other than making sure that you can nail that the answer is exactly what you want to hear. And if you don't, it's not a problem in asking again, just to go back and ask again about what you actually meant.
Last one, top 3 tips for managing teams in India.
Okay, top 3 tips are, again, what I said was onboarding. You've got to make sure you're onboarding people really well. You've got to make sure that they understand what their role is and their role in relation to everything else. And you've got to help them understand what's important to you, your own way of operating, but also what's important to them. And to give them, and I'll give you a 4th, and that is to give them permission to ask you to learn. And I'll give you a 5th one, allow people to make mistakes. So as long as people are learning, that's the important thing. You can rely on Uplers to make sure that people have got 90% of the skill base there. The other 10% is probably around your own style.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for your time today.